For the benefit of those of you who tend to get nervous without a net, I thought perhaps we should just sort of, not literally, but sort of back up a little on some of what we were talking about last time when I was trying to encourage many of you to do those triple blindfolded back somersaults. You mean the intro's already going? The apology, the caveat's already falling apart. All right. We were mentioning still about, if I keep trying to bring everything up to date, you understand, the actual intro, if I start saying, all right, we're still kind of talking about how it is that speech is now of supreme importance in man's secondary world, and then try to remind you what I mean by the secondary world. We were talking about, you fill in the rest of it, you do the intro at home. We were talking about, if you recall, it would only be a neuro-revolutionist who really wants to know where he is, and how it is that everyone else, the ordinary mind, is quite satisfied just to be able to somehow name their neighborhood, their culture, their nation, their religion, which is, in part, the real basis. As always, there is a primary basis. It's no great secret, but there is a primary basis that takes on a certain kind of revolutionist, questionable aura that goes from nationalism, as where the sentence started, patriotism of people saying, yes, I cry, or I could whip somebody's ass when they play the national anthem of Slovenia. When it gets into the secondary, what makes it somewhat questionable, not that ordinary people attacking patriotism or referring to it in a pejorative sense of it being jingoism and etc., it's not that it has no basis, but when it gets out to be the basis, that that's the only way that people can identify themselves. That yes, I am a Muslim. And the tacit part being, like, well, screw you. That is the person who said it. The yes, I'm so-and-so. They are naming their neighborhood. They are verbally raising their leg and marking off of trying to, in your head, in your reception to their dance, that I can name what I am. Now, as always, that is, as you know, for the benefit of you people out there picking this up on your grandmother's walker. Somebody said they tried to, I guess it was that Kyroots that tried to pick it up on an aluminum walker, and that's, no wonder the reception is bad. It's not that there is anything amiss with people defending their religion verbally, and their nation, and their neighborhood, and their family, and all. Of course, a lot of good it'd do if I said, yes, there is something wrong. Well, if there was, what are we going to do? I don't know, I just suddenly had pictures of some of you being cartoon characters and putting on some kind of faux Don Quixote outfit and going out to attack what? A lot of people, yeah. Thousands of people, yeah. Millions, yeah. Billions, yeah. How about this? It's you, and then it's all the rest of the world over there. I mean, even Walt Disney, should they be able to bring him back alive with Elvis, would have to go, that is a strong scenario to have to draw. I don't think even he would want to be in charge of that kind of animation, because I know that the gods wouldn't, so. Back to where we were, it'd only be a new revolutionist who actually wants to know where he is, who wants to know in what universe he is existing. Notwithstanding the fact, also, that, to mix our metaphors again, so what? That life has everyone standing in line. We're waiting for that big thrill over the hill. And I don't want the publishers of Hank Ballard's music to write me about using that. Everyone's standing in line, but life also makes those standing in line do what? Complain about it. Knowing that you're standing in line is to not know where you are. No, if you only know that you're standing in line, that is, all I know is, if I was an ordinary person, you say, well, all I know is I'm alive and I'm, fair to middling pissed off about it. Or upset, disturbed, irritated. I wonder what's going on. I have certain doubts. Those people, although everyone is made to do that, or you wouldn't even be here. You wouldn't even be watching this. So everyone has that. But then the kind of dissatisfaction of being an open-ended, unfinished piece of work in the nervous system continuing to grow. The individual then is left with having a certain kind of, we'll only have to say it, satisfaction. Again, you've got your choice if you're ordinary. For me to go ahead and say, well, you've got to be satisfied with what you know now. And ordinary people will say, well, I'm not satisfied. Now, they can say that and still blinding themselves to the fact, right, you're in line complaining. Now, all I did was point out, and now you're complaining about that. Yes, I am complaining. I won't stand it. How old are you? 50? How long have you felt this way? Well, since I was... Of course, a lot of them in the Western world, they like to say things like, since I was 11. See, they try to get a foot up on Jesus and all those other people. Like, since 11, I've been disturbed and wanting to know what was going on. So let's say you've had, what's 11 from 55? You have had 39, 40. You've had 39 years to commit suicide, right? Well, yeah, if you want to put it that way. Those people are real disturbed, right? Yes, I am sick of not knowing what's going on. How sick? Real sick. Life forces everyone. Life forces the ordinary mind to be satisfied with being able to name their neighborhood, their culture, and I don't put the sentence in particular order, their race, their sex, their vocation, their hobbies. It is, in essence, it is in toto what we have referred to in the past as telling what kind of guy you are. The ordinary intellect cannot breathe without telling what kind of guy it is. The ordinary intellect, the mind of ordinary man, cannot convey information without it being self-centered. Not egotistical, but self-centered. It has to be self-referring. Ordinary mind has to deal in plagiarism. It has to deal in anecdotes. It has to deal in quoting others. And of course, at a certain level, the ordinary mind takes all of that as being a sure sign of superior intelligence. It's only if you hang around with nonsense like this does it ever begin to interfere with the ordinary entertainment, which is fairly cheap, but of going out and hearing lectures or hearing somebody give an important speech. And at certain levels, the more important it is, the more that they have practice and the more that they are full of, suddenly in the middle of something. Well, as Chief Justice Warren once said, and they say a few more things, and then they say, or as Erasmus once noted, and then they go a little bit further, and they say, or as Mozart put in a letter one time. And it goes on, and that normally passes as being very intelligent. What kind of intelligence is that? Not that that's wrong, that's just average. They are identifying, they're telling you what kind of guy they are. They're telling you, yes, I've read, but there was a Kyroot, I think it was only 48 hours ago, that said it's easier to think thoughts than to have them. I let Kyroots open up that night. Now somebody went, huh? But now it had 48 hours to distill. At the ordinary level, that is what collective thinking is. That is what the ordinary mind is. That is what street-level intelligence is. To use my symbols of the city as opposed to some kind of outside revolutionist thought. It is easier to think thoughts. Wait a minute, let me write this down. It's easier to think thoughts, yeah, than it is to have them. Got it. I like the sound of that. But then if you ask ordinary mind, what the hell does that mean? They'd have to go, geez, I don't know. I bet you're actually, that was some kind of Zen talk or some crap, wasn't it? It sounds as though it means something, but if you actually ask, if you're doing it at your own ordinary level, if you ask, well, what does that mean? Why did you like that? It's easier to think thoughts than to have them. That doesn't make any sense. Yeah. That is, it's easier to be a plagiarist. And an ordinary mind can say, I am not a plagiarist. If you're dealing, to put it back as always proper, without having to excuse it to ordinary minds, but in any polar-based, limited, finite reality, such as man's secondary world ordinarily is, you can always say, well, you've got your choice between something. And so I can say it's between the collectively based thinking and then whatever would be non-collectively based thinking. And if you're dealing with the former, then you're always dealing with plagiarism, no matter what you say. But just notice, I picked out the example, whether it struck all of you, maybe you've been out of school or you hadn't gone out to some sort of public intellectual or cultural affair lately, but you do know for a fact, it just didn't strike you, or I didn't seem to hear many people being struck, that those who are very intelligent, experts in a certain way, it has to be played, it's no big deal, but it has to be played with a certain kind of finesse, I guess, as opposed somewhere between It's like Perlman's playing and Grandpa Jones, if Grandpa ever plays the fiddle anymore. But there has to be a certain kind of touch to it. But ordinarily, those who pass for experts, one of the ways to prove you're an expert is to stand there and a man gives an hour-and-a-half long talk on the history of anthropology, or American jurisprudence, where goeth thou tomorrow? And for an hour and a half, he constantly, and the more that somebody passes for being an expert, the more he may drag in, if his own, the law, not just bringing in jurists and writers, he begins to bring in spiritual historical figures, drags in pop heroes, but it will be a continual slew of, well, as so-and-so said. And if you ask somebody in the audience, another ordinary, sane, reasonable, thinking person, at the ordinary level, later what they think, or you might say, Jesus, did that man have a lot of quotes? And people would normally think, well, you do. Remember, we're not laughing at somebody else. You would think, well, it does. It shows that the man took it very seriously. The man obviously prepared his speech, as opposed to some people we know. The man obviously worked on it. The man obviously worked on it. Think about the kind of research he had to do. Think he must have 2 or 3 of those kind of good books, world famous quotations that have indexes that you look up, wherever you want to find, like, love, God, family. Look up subjects that interest you. Look under F sometimes. It's not as much as you would think. Well, for you sports-minded people. There's a lot on figs and futility, which I don't know what the connection is. Unless eating fig Newtons brings about no ultimate enjoyment. I've never... At any rate, you would think, well, the man went through a lot of effort. He had the ability to put together different ideas. And he continued the flow of the speech, because he would get to one subject and he would suddenly say, he'd jump to a whole other era than he did a minute ago. He'd be talking about something, he'd say, as Marcus Aurelius pointed out in his letters. But think about it. It can be entertaining and all that. It's just a regular run-of-the-mill hobby. That is not, you've got to see by some definition, you don't have to see, that is not thinking. That's all that's normally available. That is what we've been calling city thinking, ordinary thinking. It is indeed the kind of stable, normal, gradual, collective evolution of humanity. Here, not physically, remember, we're not talking about that because men are not changing that much physically. It's only here. That represents, there's nothing wrong, there's nothing untoward, but that represents, that is an excellent representation of the collective evolution of man's intellectual secondary world. As it used to be put, an intellectual person, a thinker, would say, we stand on the shoulders of giants. That is, we base our intellectual life on the great efforts that have gone before us. That we are, or man would say individually, some great thinker. That I am only a product of my education. I am only a product, nay, not just of education, but my own readings. Even more than that, I am only the sum total of all of the great thoughts of the great men who have gone before me. Which sounds great until you think, well, as opposed to what? What's the alternative? I am a product of the great intellectual efforts of all of the frogs and combines that have gone before. All of that, back to where it was, I must assume, by making that kind of shoulder gesture, I'll go ahead and assume that you do understand that is the normal course. That's what education is. Western, Eastern, all forms, that is what the historical, intellectual, cultural, scientific evolution of humanity is that everyone's identifying themselves, telling what kind of guy they are collectively. At the ordinary level, any exception to that, any anomaly, is not a revolutionist out there. It's not anything to be admired. It is people, again, that get to wear those real nice, tight-fitting coats. Like this. And you don't have to tie your own shoes. You don't have to wipe the sweat from your brow. Someone will do it for you. At the ordinary level, to not be standing on the shoulders of giants, to not be a product of all that's gone before, simply means you're crazy. You are, and you're of no consequence. That's why life treats you that way. Is you are just a little sudden, small tributary that ran off the main river that kind of ran out of water. You are one of those loose, sticky wires hoping for an electrician. All of that is a naming by ordinary minds of their locality. It is a naming of their neighborhood. It is, and it does not have to be in some real negative sense parochial, because the mind can go ahead in conjunction with its good friend and ally, the tongue, can say, no, I am not just an Armenian Christian one-armed carpenter. I have a worldview. I consider myself, I grew up as an Armenian one-armed Christian carpenter. But due to my great reading off of my own, I couldn't afford a scholarship. I now have a greater worldview. I do not think of myself in such limited terms. I try to think globally, etc. They can say that, but it is still based upon the collective thinking. Even if they're saying, I am rebelling against that kind of parochial attitude toward life, that I am struggling against that, and in some ways I have, if not transcended it, I have moved a few steps beyond it. That is still identifying what kind of guy you are. That is still naming the locale. You understand? You're naming your neighborhood. It is not the same as knowing where you are. It's not even the same as wanting to know where you are. Now, I can say, as always, that everybody does want to know where they are. For me to say only a revolutionist wants to know where they are, if anybody was just trying to tune into some of this and trying to figure out that it had some kind of metaphorical meaning, they could say, well, what he means is that he represents some kind of group, or he's talking about some kind of special people that are, he calls them revolutionists, and you're a revolutionist, and that nobody else wants to do that. That's not true. Everybody wants to do it. Everybody knows all this. It's just life is arranged in such a way. There you are waiting in line for the thrill over the hill, waiting in line. Life makes you your own genes. You got no choice if you are sane, if you are not locked up with no shoelaces, with only Velcro on your shoes and perhaps on your mind. You can work on that one later. Then life is genetically has made you antsy about standing in line. That nobody wants to stand in line if you're sane. You don't like it. I don't know what's going on. Where is this headed? What's the meaning of life? Why does gas cost so much after we went through that war? You know? And of course, why? Why is that one shoe still in the damn road? All those questions, life makes you genetically ask such questions, makes you dissatisfied in line, but what? Simonize? No. Simultaneously. Also makes you what? Unable to move. We can call it all sorts of things. Religion calls it one thing, philosophy calls it something, psychology calls it something. You can look at it as all sorts of ways. One of the easiest way to look at it is simply that's the way it is. Or as parenthetically, talk about something unsatisfying for somebody tuned in, but hey, the program's free. Of course, I say that, but all this stuff on cable, people pay for that, don't they? I've never got no. I shouldn't say that if people won't look. Do people actually pay somebody to pipe TV into their house? That is the way it works, isn't it? If you pay them. I kept waiting. I don't know. Maybe I was back drinking or something. I kept waiting for life to arrange itself to where you'd find a note on your door that they would offer to pay you if they could, send in these TV shows. Maybe I should be a poster boy for stupidity. At any rate, in a real sense, everyone, I started to say there are several ways to look at it. One of them is just that's the way it is, which is really the answer. But you can look at it in somewhat of a scientific way that it is simply, or one way, simply the kind of inertia of being alive. The closing Kyroots tonight, if you notice, there was a guy that found his nervous system to be unusually anxious and kind of antsy, and the local guide did a quick study of him and said, well, here's your problem. A man of your age, a person of your age, you shouldn't still have a nervous system all that excited and active. I notice Kyroots didn't say what age. Do we want to play guessy? Nowadays, the age, thanks to progress, now that's not cynical, thanks to progress, some of you are old enough that the age used to be, let's just say in general in this part of the world, maybe 21. It's where they got the idea of the legal age of responsibility. But now the age is less than that. Nowadays it's quite conceivable. It happens. It's not that unusual to find people that would fit into that Kyroot that are now no more than 21. In other words, the realization genetically that I am in line here waiting for the thrill, waiting in line, and I've already had a few years. People, of course, don't judge it, time it, but you've had a few years of sticking out your tongue at life and wrecking your old man's car, wrecking your car, getting put in jail, being busted for drugs, getting to be born again. Figure that out. Ordinary people now at the age of 18 or 19 are reformed drug addicts. Jesus, kind of breaks your heart to think, you mean you only had fun for a couple of years and then had to... As people used to say, back in the good old days, it took 40 years to drink enough that you had to, reform. But now, as I said, it is actually progress. I just don't want to... It is a kind of, well, I was going to say a kind of inertia, if you wanted to look at it that way. It's all sorts of things. It could be described as, it's all the same, but it could be described, it's the weight of being alive. It's the pressures of modern day. It's the increasing complexities of modern life that just makes it harder. Some of you of a different age might, to give you a quick example, just so that you don't think that I really was trying to lose you. I guess it could be people nowadays that could be, say, 20 years old and read books about even just people 20 years ago, saving up their money, leaving everything and going off on some spiritual trek to Tibet. And thinking, well, Jesus, boy, I wish I could do that because life still interests me. My nervous system is not completely dead. And I'd like to, I wonder what the hell's going on. But, boy, I wish I'd been alive in the 60s, which is... It is the increasing feeling, and it's not just, by the way, it is just not temporally speaking having to do with what appears to be the movement of time in the external world. It happens in the individual nervous system, whoever you are at whatever time you lived. If I was staying here talking to somebody in 1000 A.D. instead of 1991, it'd still be the same. Your individual nervous system finally reaches a point that it has progressed, that it feels like, well, I missed it. I would like to know what's going on, but geez, here it is that I'm 22 years old now. I'm 33 years old. So life arranges it, not for your benefit and not to just give you the RA, but your nervous system being open-ended and life still expanding collectively through humanity, everyone feels like, look, I don't really like just standing here in line. A lot of this is fun. I can drive my car and I can have good food, a few drinks, and there's always sex. But I feel like I'm some way trapped. I feel like I'd like to be more free. I'd like to be more creative. I just feel like some kind of invisible, if not an absolute straitjacket, within certain restraints. Everyone is waiting in line. Everyone is made to carp about it, to be dissatisfied if you're sane, by any ordinary definition. And yet, recall that there you stand in line, and everyone is, at least metaphorically, driven to call for the wine list. But in line, everyone is served grape juice. And it's all right. You shuffle along for 65 years, and you can, if it's pointed out periodically, tell them boy, bring around my Ferrari. And they bring you around the Volkswagen. And you sit in it, there in line with everybody else. So everyone is saying, I want to know where I am. Everyone is saying, I want to be in some way more creative. I want to be freer. It is not arranged that way. And part of this is where we started tonight, that it would be only a neurorevolutionist, whatever the hell it is, who would actually want to know where he is. Know it to the point to do something about it. He would not be satisfied in any way to be able to name, as everyone else has to be, as you're supposed to be, collectively. He would not be satisfied to be able to name his neighborhood. It is not enough, not because it's wrong, but all of you know this. In a sense, I am now preaching to the converted, as they used to say in southern Alabama. I always confuse the two. If you understand that, well, there is a certain similarity. Both of them, in Montgomery and in Tehran, in the state capitals, they have there in the rotunda the centerpiece of their cultural life. And in both cases, I don't know how it happened, it's a plastered duck. Talk about your coincidences. At any rate, a neurorevolutionist, somebody actually doing something out of the ordinary, not just talking about it, would not be satisfied, not because it's wrong, back to where we were, not because it's wrong, but would not be satisfied in any manner whatsoever. Just to be able to say, and not just overtly, but to himself, that he identifies where he is on the basis, well, at least I know I'm a male, fairly good shape, middle-aged Jew, good job, second wife holding out all right, kids are not in jail. That is not satisfactory to a neurorevolutionist. Not because, one more time, not because that is wrong. Not because there's anything wrong with whatever to fill in your own blanks. Male, female, middle-aged, young, Jew, Christian. Any nation, it's not because it's wrong. But it is not satisfying. That does not tell the kind of nervous system that we're referring to now as a neurorevolutionist nervous system. It simply does not satisfy. And of course, the rebellion, that is the opposite of that, does not satisfy. Because everyone, in a sense, went through a quick series or quick episode of your own quite crude city-level rebellion already to get here. That is, if you were a male German Christian, at some point you turned around in your identification, your naming of that kind of neighborhood, at some time you turned around to the collective naming of the German Christian male neighborhood and you went, get that out of your system. Boy, did you teach them. As you know, that's not rebellion. If that's rebellion, then rebellion doesn't mean anything. That is not the revolution. So it's not that the ordinary naming of one's locality, that one's neighborhood, culture, nation, it's not that that's wrong, but also it's not that the opposite is correct. Just no difference. But that is in no way satisfying to a neurorevolutionist. That will not feed it, because you're still in line. The only difference is, metaphorically, if you were in line saying like this, and this is where you were a Muslim from the People's Democratic Republic of Yemen, and you decided, boy, I wised up, and you became, I don't know how, I don't want to go into it, but you became a female Italian Jew. That is, you turn around this way, you understand, you have turned your back on your previous identification. May I engage in dramatic, I started to say foreplay, and I thought I shouldn't say that. But then I said, well, I'll say it because somebody will go, well, what the hell that mean? Dramatic cynicism, sarcasm, just for dramatic effect. In other words, I was this, but then I began to think, this does not nourish me. This is old-timey. This is out of date. This is my forefathers' idea of what life's about. Ha! Are we talking progress here or what, folks? You're still in line going in the other direction. So it's not good or bad in any particular case. It's not right or wrong, proper or improper. It is simply that naming the collective neighborhood in which everyone is born, in which everyone is raised, in which most everyone lives and dies, being able to name that or to disname it, to refute it, will not satisfy a neurorevolutionist. A neurorevolutionist actually wants to know where he is, and know where you are. You've got to know about the line. You've got to know about the neighborhood. You've got to know that your nervous system up until then had been satisfied with naming your locality, even if it had been rebellious at that level. In other words, if it kept insisting, I am not a German Jew, I am not an Italian Christian, I am not a Yemen Muslim, I am not whatever, it's the same thing. That will never get you to be able to identify your universe. You cannot see where you are. You'll never know where you are. There is another aspect. A neurorevolutionist, very shortly after that, whenever that would be, let's say we bypassed all of that. A neurorevolutionist also knows that you cannot. He knows for himself, he would see that knowing where you are I'm trying to debate whether to go on only 6 minutes. Does this look like debating? What happens when I just stop this close to the tape? What does it do to these things you're doing on cable?
Okay. No problem.
What do you do? I'm just curious. Well, this is filling up part of it. What do you do?
More Kyroots on, or extend the introduction.
But then that doesn't answer the question I never asked. What happens when I go over? I don't think about it. Well, we can do this, since you made me slip up and do it once already. It's play ordinary television, ordinary life nowadays, and spend the last few minutes teasing, that is, giving previews. But that's still not as good. They've got us all down pat. Just to take a 30-minute news program or whatever kind of program nowadays, and not say what, stay tuned tomorrow. They say, stay tuned coming up. But those of you who are good, I never did get back into it. We just kind of stumbled across recently was that the real health, the broadcasting, programming health of the station, WDNA, is exemplified, is proven by the fact that it hardly ever gets around to the programming, which of course is where all the TV and radio people learn that trick. As if you could learn anywhere else, but you understand that is what life is about. That is what the genetic broadcasting going on in everybody is doing. Taking that kind of observation of ordinary television, I assume everybody remembers me pointing it out, that more and more they will take a 30-minute, say a news show, and more of it is used saying, well, stay tuned after the commercial, or stay tuned at the last segment today, and they name it something, and they spend a good part of the 30 minutes not having to come up with news. You know, if they've got, say, 10 minutes worth of news, they can drag it out and put in another 10 minutes worth of commercials already, and then 10 minutes worth of previews, not of tomorrow, but at least previews of not right this second. Be sure and stay tuned later in the show, we'll do so-and-so. And they keep that up, and you end up with only having to do, what, 10 minutes worth of right now. Not that that's wrong. I mean, if you watch television or you got an ordinary hobby, you deserve the ordinary things that go along with it. There's nothing wrong. But notice where they got that. Notice what life is. That's what standing in line is. That is what the dissatisfaction that can't be scratched is. The DNA of life, the point that the nervous system is open-ended, the station is broadcasting continually. But I've got news for you. Once you get a glimpse of it, not that it's bad, but me making the jokes, and I'm just making up the figures more or less, but of saying that a 30-minute news program now can get by with 10 minutes worth of actual news or some kind of program. You know, these kind of interview, it doesn't have to be just news, it can be some kind of, famous interviews with famous people. And they'll spend 10 minutes of actually sending somebody out of the studio and having to take cameras over to somebody's house and interview them, and they can spend now the remaining 10 minutes after commercials of what's coming up. If you think that's something, you just hadn't looked at life. Because you have got being broadcast through your own nervous system. Not a program going on today. It's just enough to keep you tuned in. You know, look at it that way? Just enough to keep you hanging on. Is that great Handel oratory used to go? I think that was the words. Just enough to keep you hanging on. It was either Handel or Wilson Pickett and Steve Cropper. I can't remember. But once you get the feel, once you can tune directly into that nervous system and what the DNA is broadcasting, it hardly gives any new instant programming right now. What you're living off of is teasers. What you're living off of is coming attractions. What you're living off of are trailers. It is continuously saying, well, stay tuned tomorrow when so-and-so will happen. Or if not tomorrow, stay tuned just a little later. And just a little later can just be the feeling you have. It can be at a non-verbal level even. That, whoa, things will get better in a minute. I'll have another drink, some more coffee, something else, or I just think a little bit. The broadcast is saying continually, stay tuned, stay tuned, stay tuned. 65 years you stay tuned. And as far as original programming, what does it amount to? It's probably enough that might fill up the empty space inside of an attorney's heart. Just I guess we killed enough time. I was going to give one teaser. What I started to say, and we'll pick it up next time, was that once you understood some of this on your own and see it, and of course you do, then my descriptions and words are of no great consequence, but still using my description, it would reach the point that you're a revolutionist then would know that where you are depends on where you think you are. With that, that's what I was debating whether to go into, but now that has become moot since we can't go into it. Ha ha ha. So is the Pope and Saddam used and of course George Steinbrenner. Don't leave him out. All right, both hands. What the hell?